That's Kamanzi? Yes, mother. He co-founded the company. Then we never knew who we were judging.
I would rather see you single than watch you throw away your future.
You met him once, mother. You don't know who he really is. Love won't protect you from carrying a man.
And what if you're judging his entire future by what you see tonight?
Beside Ineza stood Kamanzi Nyomugabo, still holding the modest handcrafted gift he had brought, while his aging Toyota sat outside among the family's polished luxury cars. Mireille urged her sister to leave him before love became a burden she would regret. Ineza refused to look away from her mother. And what will you say if one day you discover you were completely wrong about him? She asked. No one in that beautiful room realized Kamanzi was keeping one truth to him, a truth that would soon force the entire family to reconsider everything they believed about him. Before this story begins, if you were Ineza, would you listen to your family or trust the man you love? Tell us in the comments. The Rukundo family villa in Nyarutarama glowed beneath the soft lights of Kigali. The house reflects everything Vestin Mukamhana had spent years building after her husband passed away. Floor-to-ceiling glass windows, polished stone floors, contemporary Rwandan artwork, and carefully selected furniture that made the living room feel more like the private lounge of a luxury hotel than a family. Ineza Rukundo stood near the dining table in an emerald green dress trimmed with subtle African patterns. She had spent the entire drive there telling herself that the evening would be fine. Then Kamanzi Nyomugabo arrived. Not in the polished SUV her mother had expected. Not with a driver. He stepped out of an aging silver Toyota, adjusted his mustard linen jacket, and walked toward the entrance carrying a small wooden box. Ineza immediately saw her mother glance through the window. That single glance told her everything. Please, Ineza whispered when she opened the door for him, don't let my mother's face frighten you. Kamanzi smiled. I work with difficult clients. My mother is not a client. Then I should be even more afraid. Ineza laughed despite herself. That was one of the things she loved about him. Kamanzi never seemed desperate to impress anyone. Inside, Vestin welcomed him politely. Mireille Rukundo, Ineza's older sister, wore a striking burgundy dress and gold earrings. She studied Kamanzi with the same concentration she normally reserved for financial reports. Kamanzi handed Vestin the wooden box. This is for you, Madame Mukamana. Vestin opened it. Inside was a beautifully carved serving tray decorated with a geometric pattern inspired by traditional Rwandan design. It's lovely, she admitted. Where did you buy it? I made it. Vestin paused. With your own hands? Yes, something subtle changed in her expression, Ineza noticed. Dinner began pleasantly enough. They ate grilled tilapia with vegetables, plantain, and a modern interpretation of isombe prepared by Vestin's longtime cook. For several minutes, the conversation remained harmless. Then Mireille placed her glass down. So Kamanzi, Ineza tells us you work in furniture, interior design and furniture production. He corrected gently. You own a shop, I work from a workshop. Vestin looked at him. What exactly do you do there? Whatever needs doing, Kamanzi smiled. Some days I design, some days I meet suppliers. Sometimes I'm standing beside the craftsmen, trying to understand why a chair refuses to look the way it looked in my head. Mireille exchanged a glance with her mother. Ineza felt irritation rise inside her. She knew that glance. It was the silent language of women who believed they had already understood a man from 3 sentences. Vestin continued. And is the work stable? Mother, Ineza warned. I'm asking a reasonable question. Kamanzi remained composed. It has difficult months and good months. Vestin nodded slowly. Do you own a house? Ineza put down her fork. That is enough. Kamanzi touched her hand lightly. It's all right. He looked at Vestin. No, I currently rent. The silence that followed felt heavier than the answer deserved. Mireille leaned back. What are your plans for the next 5 years? Kamanzi almost smiled. Am I meeting Ineza's family or applying for financing? Mireille's expression softened for the first time. Both require due diligence. Even Vestin nearly smiled, but Ineza did not. Because underneath the elegant dinner, she could feel exactly what was happening. They were calculating him. Income, property, car, status. They were turning a human being into a balance sheet. After dinner, Kamanzi helped Ineza carry several dishes toward the kitchen, despite Vestin insisting the staff would handle them. Near the hallway, Ineza lowered her voice. "I'm sorry." "For what?" "The interrogation. They love you." "That doesn't give them permission to interview you like a suspicious investment." Kamanzi looked toward the living room. "No, but I understand what your mother is afraid of." Ineza frowned. "You do?" She wants to know whether the man beside her daughter will become another responsibility her daughter has to carry. His answer disarmed her. "You're defending her?" "I'm understanding her. That's different." Before leaving, Kamanzi thanked Vestin for dinner. He did not boast. He did not attempt to correct their assumptions. He simply walked outside, climbed into his old Toyota, and drove away. Ineza watched until the car disappeared beyond the villa gates. When she returned inside, Vestin was waiting. Mireille remained beside the dining table. "Ineza," her mother began, "you need to think carefully about this relationship." "There it is. I am serious. So am I." Vestin approached her daughter. "You have worked too hard to build your life. You have a beautiful apartment, an excellent career, savings, opportunities. Why would you deliberately choose uncertainty? You met him once. I heard enough." "No, mother. You heard that he rents a home and drives an old car. I heard that a 36-year-old man cannot give me a clear answer about financial stability." Ineza's jaw tightened. Mireille intervened. "Mom isn't saying he is a bad person. She's saying he isn't good enough." "I'm saying love is not the only thing marriage requires," Vestin replied. Her voice softened. "That somehow hurt more. I have watched women spend their best years carrying men who promised that tomorrow would be better. Eventually, those women stopped dreaming because they were too busy surviving." Ineza understood the fear behind the words, but understanding it did not mean surrendering to it. "Kamanzi has never asked me to carry him, not yet." Ineza stared at her mother. "Do you hear yourself?" Vestin took her daughter's hand. "I would rather see you single than watch you place your entire future in the hands of a man who has nothing." Ineza slowly withdrew her hand. For a moment, anger almost answered for her. Instead, she remembered the man who had just sat at their table without pretending to be someone else. Or at least, that was what she believed. She looked directly at her mother. "And what will you say if one day you discover you were completely wrong about him?" Vestin had no answer. Neither did Mireille. Outside, Kigali's lights shimmered beyond the glass walls, and somewhere across the city, inside a modest-looking workshop the Rukundo family had never bothered to ask about, Kamanzi's name sat on documents that would have made their entire dinner conversation very different. But Ineza did not know that yet. And when she finally learned the truth, her family would not be the only people she would have questions for. Ineza Rukundo stepped through the brass-framed entrance of one of Kigali's most elegant restaurants and immediately understood why her mother had chosen it. Everything about the place communicated success without needing to announce it. Cream-colored stone walls rose beneath sculpted pendant lights. Fresh flowers stood in tall ceramic vases painted with subtle Rwandan patterns. Through the wide glass windows, the green hills of Kigali stretched beyond polished terraces where executives and diplomats sat over carefully arranged lunches. Vestin Mukamana was already seated. Beside her sat Mireille, and across from them was a man Ineza had never met. He stood as she approached. Tall, composed, dressed in a perfectly tailored navy suit over a crisp white shirt, he looked exactly like the type of man her mother would describe as established. "Ineza," Vestin said warmly, "this is Dr. Lionel Habimana." Lionel extended his hand. "It's a pleasure." Ineza shook it. "Likewise." She turned toward her mother. "You didn't mention we were having company." Vestin smiled as though nothing unusual had happened. "I thought a pleasant lunch didn't require a formal announcement." Mireille suddenly became very interested in the menu. Ineza sat down. The trap was elegant, but it was still a trap. Lionel seemed to notice her discomfort. "For the record," he said, "I was also told this was simply lunch." That made Ineza look at him properly. "So we are both victims, apparently." A reluctant smile crossed her face. At least he had a sense of humor. The waiter arrived, and Vestin ordered sparkling water for the table. Lionel spoke easily about his dental practice in Kimihurura, a second clinic he was developing with two partners, and a professional conference he had recently attended. He was accomplished without being loud about it. Ineza could understand why her family liked him. "What about you?" Lionel asked. "Your mother said you work in brand strategy. I lead regional campaigns for a consumer company. Do you enjoy it?" "Most days." "Only most?" Ineza smiled. "If someone tells you they love every day of corporate life, they are either lying or selling a course." Lionel laughed. Mireille did too. Even Vestine relaxed. For several minutes, the conversation became genuinely enjoyable. Lionel asked about Ineza's work rather than her cooking. He asked what she wanted to build professionally rather than whether she planned to become a wife. He listened. That surprised her. Then Vestine said casually, "Lionel recently bought a beautiful home." Ineza slowly lowered her glass. There it was. Lionel looked uncomfortable. "Mama Vestine. And his practice is doing extremely well," Vestine continued. "It is admirable when a man builds stability before thinking about marriage." Ineza looked directly at her mother. "Is that what this lunch is?" Vestine's expression tightened. "We are eating," with a resume sitting across from me. Mireille sighed. "Ineza, I want to understand." Lionel leaned back slightly, giving her cease. Vestine kept her voice controlled. "I simply wanted you to meet someone who has built his life carefully and compare him to Kamanzi. I didn't say that." "You didn't need to." The sophistication of the room suddenly felt suffocating. Ineza looked around at the crystal glasses, linen napkins, polished cutlery, and people speaking softly over expensive meals. Everything here was beautiful. Yet she had never felt more clearly that her life was being presented as a financial decision. Mireille spoke gently. "Mom is worried because you are serious about Kamanzi." So marriage changes the mathematics of life." Ineza turned toward her sister. "People are not mathematics, no, but mortgages are. Medical bills are. Businesses fail. People lose jobs. And rich people never struggle." "That is not what I said." Lionel finally spoke. "May I say something?" Everyone looked at him. He rested his hands calmly on the table. "I think Ineza deserves to know that I did not come here to compete with another man." Vestine looked embarrassed. "Lionel," nobody said, "I know." He turned toward Ineza. "Your mother spoke highly of you. I agreed to lunch because I was interested in meeting you. That is all." Ineza appreciated the dignity in his response. "Thank you." The meal continued, though the atmosphere had changed. Lionel told a story about opening his first clinic with equipment financed through a difficult loan. He admitted he had not always been successful. There was a point when the impressive office everyone sees now was only drawings, debt, and optimism, he said. Mireille smiled. "But you had a plan." "Yes." Lionel glanced toward Ineza. "But a plan and an expensive car are not the same thing." Vestine became quiet. Ineza studied him. The man her family had chosen as evidence against Kamanzi was unexpectedly dismantling their argument. When the main course was cleared away, Vestine excused herself to speak with someone she recognized across the restaurant. Mireille followed after receiving a business call, leaving Ineza alone with Lionel. He smiled slightly. "Your mother is determined. You have no idea. I suspect I do." Ineza looked down at her hands. "I'm sorry you were brought into this." "You don't owe me an apology." He paused. "Do you love him?" The question caught her off guard. She looked up. "Kamanzi?" Lionel nodded. "I think so." "That sounds uncertain." "It isn't him I'm uncertain about." "What is it?" Ineza glanced toward her mother across the room. "My family has always been part of every important decision in my life. Education, career, property. They supported me through everything. And now I'm realizing support can quietly become permission." Lionel considered that. There is a difference between listening to people who love you and handing them the steering wheel. Ineza smiled faintly. "You're not doing a very good job convincing me to date you." He laughed. "I'm a dentist, Ineza, not a salesman." For the first time since arriving, she relaxed completely. Then Lionel became serious. "I don't know Kamanzi. Maybe your family is right about him. Maybe they are wrong. But whichever is true, you should discover it yourself." Those words remained with her. When Vestin and Mireille returned, Ineza no longer felt angry. She felt something more useful, clarity. She did not need to defend Kamanzi blindly. She also did not need to abandon him because her family feared what they did not understand. She needed to look closer, not at his car, not at his clothes, not at the assumptions her family had constructed around him, at the man himself. Before leaving, Lionel walked beside her toward the entrance. He stopped before the glass doors. "There is one thing I am curious about." "What?" He smiled. "Your family clearly likes me." Neza laughed softly. "That is painfully obvious. But do you?" She appreciated that he asked without entitlement. "You're intelligent, kind, and probably exactly the man my mother wants me to choose." "That wasn't my question." Ineza met his eyes. "No." Lionel nodded without resentment. "Then that is an answer worth respecting." Outside, Ineza stood beneath Kigali's bright sky with an unexpected certainty settling inside her. She would not choose Kamanzi because her family disliked him. She would not reject Lionel simply because her family approved him. And she would never again confuse other people's certainty with her own. There was only one place she wanted to go next: Kamanzi's workshop. Because if she was going to defend the future she wanted, she first needed to understand exactly what kind of man she was defending. Ineza Rukundo stepped through the wide metal doors of Kamanzi Niyomugaba's workshop on the quieter edge of Kigali and immediately realized how little she actually knew about the man she had been defending. She had expected something small, perhaps a dusty room with 2 workbenches and a few unfinished chairs. Instead, she found a bright, organized production space filled with polished timber, cutting equipment, design tables, fabric samples, and rows of furniture in different stages of completion. Large windows allowed the last golden light to spill across the concrete floor. More than 20 workers moved through the space. Some wore navy work shirts embroidered with a small geometric emblem. Others stood over design plans or carefully sanded curved wooden frames. Kamanzi appeared from behind a shelving unit carrying a measuring tape. His sleeves were rolled to his elbows. There was sawdust on one shoulder. He stopped when he saw her. "Ineza?" She folded her arms. "You sound surprised." "I am. You told me where you worked." "I didn't think you would arrive without warning. That is usually how surprise visits work." A smile touched his face. Then he noticed her expression. "What happened?" "Nothing happened." "That sounds dangerous." Despite herself, Ineza smiled. "I wanted to see this place." Kamanzi looked around. "Welcome to my glamorous kingdom." She glanced at a worker pushing a trolley filled with beautifully upholstered dining chairs. "This is considerably more glamorous than you made it sound." "I said I worked in furniture." "You said it like you and 3 chairs were sharing rent." Kamanzi laughed. Before he could answer, a woman in a vivid orange and blue kitenge blouse approached carrying several folders. "Kamanzi, the Musanzi shipment has been checked. Any damage? 2 table legs need replacing. Don't send them to the client. We can repair them, replace them. If we wouldn't accept them in our own homes, we shouldn't ask a client to." The woman nodded before noticing Ineza. Kamanzi introduced them. "This is Claudine Uwas, our production coordinator." Claudine smiled warmly. "So you are Ineza." Ineza raised an eyebrow. Kamanzi cleared his throat. "I may have mentioned you more than once," Claudine said. "Thank you, Claudine, for telling the truth, for returning to work." Claudine laughed and walked away. Ineza looked at him. "You talk about me here, occasionally." "How occasionally?" "I would like to preserve some dignity." They walked deeper into the workshop. Kamanzi showed her a series of dining tables commissioned for a boutique hotel. The pieces mixed contemporary lines with patterns inspired by traditional Rwandan geometric design. Ineza ran her fingers lightly across a smooth wooden edge. "This is beautiful. Wait until you see the invoice." She laughed. Nearby, an older craftsman named Emmanuel was standing beside an unfinished cabinet, staring at his phone. Kamanzi noticed. He walked over. "Everything all right?" Emmanuel hesitated. "My wife needs help at home." "Then go. I have not finished this. It will still be here." Emmanuel lowered his voice. "I already missed work recently. I cannot afford another deduction." Kamanzi's expression changed. There won't be one. Emmanuel looked at him. But go home. Claudine can adjust the schedule. The older man seemed embarrassed by the kindness. Thank you. Don't thank me for allowing you to be a husband. Emmanuel nodded and quickly gathered his things. Ineza watched silently. When Kamanzi returned to her, she asked, "Do you always do that?" "Do what?" "Pay people for leaving work." He wasn't leaving because he wanted an afternoon at a resort. That isn't what I meant. Kamanzi leaned against the work table. My father worked construction for most of his life. There were months when missing one shift meant something disappeared from our table. Ineza had never heard him speak much about his childhood. You never told me that. You never asked. That is becoming your favorite defense. He smiled, but she did not. Something about the evening was beginning to bother her, not because she had discovered anything bad. Quite the opposite. Everything she saw suggested Kamanzi carried far more responsibility than he had allowed her family to understand. How many people work here? She asked. 27 directly. More when we use independent craftspeople. And you manage all this? I help manage it. Help? Yes. That careful answer caught her attention. She looked around again. Workers approached him with questions. Suppliers called him. The production coordinator reported directly to him. Nothing about his behavior resembled an ordinary employee. Kamanzi. Yes? What exactly is your position here? He picked up a pencil from the table. I design. That is not what I asked. I manage projects. That is also not what I asked. He looked at her. Ineza stepped closer. My mother practically asked for your bank statements. And you sat at that table allowing everyone to believe you were barely surviving. I never said I was struggling. You didn't correct them. Would correcting them have changed how they treated me? That is not the point. Maybe it is. The warmth between them cooled. Ineza glanced toward a nearby desk, while Kamanzi was called away briefly by a craftsman asking about a measurement. A thick presentation folder rested beside several material samples. On its cover was the same geometric emblem embroidered on the workers' shirts. Imizi Living. Ineza had seen the name before. Their company had supplied furniture for restaurants, private residences, and several upscale hospitality projects. She opened the folder only enough to see the first page, a corporate proposal. Below the company name was several executive titles. Her eyes stopped. Kamanzi Mugabo, co-founder and design director. For a moment, she simply stared. Kamanzi returned. He saw the folder in her hands. The expression on his face told Ineza immediately that there was no misunderstanding. She lifted her eyes. Co-founder, he said nothing. You own this company? Part of it. How large a part? Ineza. No, her voice remained controlled, but the disappointment beneath it was unmistakable. You stood in my mother's house while they judged you by your car, your rented home, your clothes. You watched me defend you. I never asked you to defend me. That makes it worse. Kamanzi placed the measuring tape slowly on the table. I wasn't hiding because I wanted to embarrass you. Then why? He looked across the workshop before meeting her eyes again. Because I wanted your family to decide whether I deserved respect before they knew what my name was attached to. Ineza stared at him. And what about me? His expression changed. She held up the folder. Was I being tested too? No. Are you sure? The question landed harder than she intended. Kamanzi took a step toward her. Ineza, this company is not some secret fortune. Most of what we earn goes back into equipment, wages, materials, expansion. I drive that car because it works. I rent because I haven't decided where I want to build a home. That is not what I'm angry about. I know. Do you? She placed the folder carefully back on the desk. Her voice softened. You were so determined to know whether my family would judge you without money that you forgot something. What? Ineza looked directly at him. Trust works both ways. For the first time since she had arrived, Kamanzi had no clever response. Around them, the workshop continued operating. Wood was measured. Fabric was folded. Orders were prepared. But something between them had shifted. Ineza had come looking for proof that her family had misjudged Kamanzi. She had found it. The problem was that she had also discovered that Kamanzi had allowed the misunderstanding to continue. And now the question was no longer whether her family could see beyond appearances. It was whether the man she loved could understand the difference between privacy and withholding the truth. Ineza sat across from Kamanzi on the covered terrace of a quiet restaurant overlooking the lights scattered across Kigali's hills. She had chosen the table deliberately, private enough for honesty, public enough that neither of them could turn the conversation into something dramatic. Ineza wore a deep sapphire dress with delicate patterned sleeves, but there was none of her usual warmth in her expression. Kamanzi sat opposite her in a charcoal linen shirt, his hands resting beside an untouched glass of water. For several moments, neither spoke. Finally, Kamanzi broke the silence. "You've barely looked at me. I'm looking at you now. That somehow feels worse. It should." He accepted that without argument. Ineza leaned back. "I want the truth, not the polished version. Not the version you think will make me understand you. You deserve that. Then start with easy living." Kamanzi exhaled slowly. "I founded it with 2 partners. I oversee design, product development, and part of the operations. How long? Several years. And it is successful? It is growing." That was not my question. He gave a restrained smile. "No, it wasn't." Ineza waited. Kamanzi continued. "We have contracts with hotels, private developments, restaurants, and corporate clients. We own production equipment. We lease additional workspace. We employ permanent staff and work with independent craftspeople across Rwanda." Ineza folded her hands. "So my family was wrong." "Yes, very wrong." Kamanzi hesitated. "That depends on what they believed. They believed I was dating a man who could barely support himself. I can support myself." "You knew they didn't think so?" "Yes." The honesty irritated her more than an excuse would have. "Then why did you sit there and let it happen?" Kamanzi looked towards the city. "Because I have sat at other tables where the opposite happened." Ineza said nothing. He continued. "People discovered what I did before they knew me. Suddenly my jokes became funnier. My opinions became smarter. People who barely answered my messages wanted introductions to investors. Women who had no interest in me became very interested in the company." "That happened to you?" "More than once." There was no self-pity in his voice, only fatigue. "One woman asked about our annual revenue before she asked whether my mother was still alive." Ineza's expression softened slightly. "But I am not that woman. I know." "Do you?" "Yes." "Then why did you treat me as though I might be?" "I didn't." "You withheld something important because you were afraid my feelings might change." "That is a test, Kamanzi, whether you call it one or not." His jaw tightened. "I never pretended to be poor. No. You found a more sophisticated way to do the same thing." That landed. Kamanzi looked at her carefully. "I drive an old car because I don't care about replacing it. That isn't the issue. I rent because the company has required most of my attention. Still not the issue. I never lied about my work." Ineza leaned forward. "You told my mother you worked from a workshop." "I do. You are the co-founder. I also sweep the workshop floor when necessary." "Kamanzi." He stopped. Her voice became quieter. "You are trying to defend the accuracy of your words instead of accepting the effect of your silence." For the first time, he looked uncomfortable. Ineza continued. "My family judged you unfairly. I know that. But while I was arguing with them, you had information that would have changed the entire conversation. And what would that have proved? That isn't your decision to make." He looked at her. She held his gaze. "You decided everyone should meet the version of you without status attached. Fine. But you also decided when I was allowed to know the rest. I wanted you to know me. I already did." "Ineza." "No, listen." She placed both palms lightly on the table. "My mother thinks money reveals whether a man is safe. You think hiding money reveals whether a woman is genuine." Kamanzi's expression changed. "And both of you are making the same mistake." "What mistake?" "You're deciding who I am before allowing me to show you." He had no immediate response. Quiet between them felt different now. Not hostile, honest. Kamanzi finally lowered his eyes. "When you say it that way, I sound arrogant. I think frightened is more accurate." He looked up. That surprised him. Ineza's anger remained, but compassion had begun to settle beside it. "I understand why you became careful." she said. But being hurt by people who wanted your money does not give you permission to make the next woman prove she is different. I never meant to make you prove anything. Intent does not erase impact. Kamanzi nodded slowly. I know, no. I think you are beginning to know. He accepted that too. A server quietly placed their meals on the table and moved away. Neither touched the food. Kamanzi looked at Ineza. There is something else you should understand. She waited. Easy living looks impressive from outside, but the business is not a vault filled with cash. We have obligations, machinery financing, supplier contracts, payroll, expansion costs. I don't care how wealthy you are. I know. I need you to really hear that. I do. Ineza's voice softened. If you lost the company, I would not suddenly think you were less of a man. Kamanzi stared at her. But if you kept something important from me, because you were afraid of how I might react, that would make me question whether we could build a life together. That distinction struck him harder than anything else she had said. For Kamanzi, money had always been the test. For Ineza, trust was. He reached across the table but stopped before touching her hand. Can I tell you why I never bought the house everyone expected me to buy? You can. My father spent his life building things for other people, houses, offices, restaurants. He died without ever owning the kind of home he built for clients. Ineza listened. When Imizi began earning real money, everyone told me to buy something impressive. A villa, a new car, something that announced I had arrived. But you didn't. I kept investing in the company. Why? Because I wanted the men and women working with me to have stable work before I had impressive gates. Ineza looked down. That was the Kamanzi she had fallen for. Responsible, measured, generous without advertising it. And that made what he had done more complicated, not less. A bad man would have been easy to leave. A good man who had made a serious mistake demanded a harder decision. Kamanzi, I finally said, I'm sorry. She looked at him. Not, I'm sorry you misunderstood. Not, I'm sorry your family judged me. Just, I'm sorry, he continued. I thought I was protecting myself. I didn't realize I was making you pay for disappointments you never caused. Ineza felt something inside her loosen, but not enough. Thank you for saying that. Can you forgive me? She remained silent for several seconds. I don't know yet. Pain crossed his face, but he nodded. That's fair. Ineza stood. Kamanzi looked up. Are you leaving? Yes. Does this mean we're finished? She picked up her handbag. It means I need space to decide what I actually believe without my mother telling me you're wrong for me, and without you deciding what information I need to prove I'm right for you. He stood as well. Ineza, she paused. I love you. Her eyes met his. The words still mattered, but they no longer solved everything. I love you too, she said quietly. Kamanzi looked relieved for only a moment. Then she added, and that is exactly why honesty matters. She walked away before emotion could weaken the boundary she had finally learned to draw. Kamanzi remained beside the table, watching her disappear through the restaurant doors. For the first time, he understood something his successful business career had never taught him. Trust could not be managed like a contract. It could not be protected by withholding risk. And a woman who truly loved him did not need to be tested. She needed to be trusted. Ineza Rukundo stood on the balcony of her modern apartment in Nyarutarama, watching the soft Kigali light settle across the hills. She wore a flowing coral dress with subtle kitenge detailing along the sleeves, but she had changed out of her office heels the moment she came home. A cup of untouched tea rested on the glass table beside her. Her phone had been silent. Kamanzi had respected the space she asked for. Strangely, that made everything harder. There were no dramatic apologies waiting in her messages. No flowers sent to her office. No attempts to convince her mother. Just silence. A knock came from the front door. Ineza frowned. When she opened it, Mireille stood outside holding a paper bag from a bakery. I brought peace offerings, her sister said. Are you the one who needs forgiveness? No, but I assumed pastries would improve my chances of being allowed inside. Ineza stepped aside. Mireille entered and looked around the apartment. Its cream furniture, warm wood details, bright paintings, and large windows reflected Ineza perfectly. Elegant but comfortable, expensive, without being designed to impress her strangers. Mireille placed the bag on the kitchen island. Mom thinks you're angry with her. I am. She also thinks you're angry with me. I am. Mireille nodded. At least we have clarity. Ineza almost smiled. They carried coffee and pastries to the balcony. For a while, neither mentioned Kamanzi. Then Mireille asked, have you spoken to him? Noble. Are you going to? I don't know. Mireille studied her sister. That bad? Ineza looked toward the city. He owns part of the company. Mireille blinked. What company? Imizi Living. This time Mireille's reaction was unmistakable. The furniture company? Yes. The one working with hotels? Yes. And he forgot to mention that? He didn't forget, Mireille leaned back. Oh, exactly, Ineza thought. That one word captured the entire problem. I went to his workshop, Ineza explained. I saw how he works, how he treats people. He has employees depending on him. He's responsible, disciplined. Everything Mom said he wasn't. Then Mom was wrong. Yes, Mireille waited. But Ineza picked up her cup. He let us think it. Her sister became quiet. He says he wanted people to know him without being influenced by his position. That sounds reasonable until you are the person who wasn't trusted with the truth. Ineza looked at her. Exactly, Mireille sighed. I should probably defend him, considering how aggressively I interviewed him. That would be ironic, but I won't. Why? Because you are right. Ineza had expected resistance. Instead, Mireille continued. Privacy is one thing. Managing someone's perception of you is another. Ineza lowered her eyes. I love him. I know. That is what makes me feel ridiculous. Why? Because part of me wants to call him right now and say none of it matters. Mireille shook her head. That would be easier, yes. But easier is not always kinder to your future self. Ineza looked at her sister. Mireille had spent years treating relationships as though they were investments. But beneath the spreadsheets was a woman who understood consequences. You know what scares me? Ineza asked. What? What if I punish him because Mom made me suspicious? Then don't punish him. And what if I forg too quickly because I want to prove Mom wrong? Don't do that either. Ineza smiled bitterly. You make everything sound simple. No, I'm telling you not to choose from pride. That stayed with her. Mireille leaned forward. If Kamanzi had actually been a struggling carpenter with no company, would you still want him? Yes, if he lost Imizi's next year, I would still love him. Then money is not the question. No, what is? Ineza answered without hesitation. Whether I can trust him to tell me uncomfortable truths. Mireille nodded. There you are. Another knock interrupted them. Both women turned. Ineza's chest tightened. She already knew. When she opened the door, Kamanzi stood in the corridor. He wore dark trousers and a cream shirt with narrow embroidered detailing at the collar. There were no flowers in his hands, no gift, nothing designed to soften her. I know you asked for space, he said. If this is too soon, I'll leave. Mireille appeared behind Ineza. I was leaving anyway. You don't have to, Ineza said. Yes, I do. Mireille picked up her handbag. As she passed Kamanzi, she stopped. I was unfair to you at dinner. He looked surprised. I was also very thorough. That too. But Ineza defending you did not mean you were entitled to make her do it without all the facts. Kamanzi nodded. I understand. I hope so. Then Mireille left. Kamanzi remained near the doorway until Ineza stepped aside. You can come in, he entered. Neither sat immediately. I've been thinking about what you said, he began. That usually means you have prepared a speech. I had one. Ineza raised an eyebrow. What happened to it? It sounded much better when you weren't standing in front of me. She almost laughed. Almost. Kamanzi finally sat across from her. I owe you the truth without defending myself. Ineza waited. When Imizi started succeeding, I changed. How? I became suspicious of people. He rubbed his hands together. Every compliment sounded like it had a question behind it. Every new friendship felt like it might become a request. That sounds exhausting. It was. And then I decided I would stop talking about the company unless necessary. That is understandable. I went further. Ineza said nothing. I started liking the fact that people underestimated me. She looked at him carefully. Why? Because it made me feel protected. Protected from what? Disappointment. There it was. Not strategy. Fear, Kamanzi continued. If someone respected me while thinking I had little, I felt safe. If they changed after learning more, I knew what they valued. Ineza crossed her arms, so it was a test. He hesitated, yes. The word hurt, but she appreciated that he finally said it. And me, he shook his head. I didn't begin our relationship intending to test you. But you continued hiding. Yes, why? Because the more I loved you, the more afraid I became that telling you would change something. Ineza's eyes hardened. Kamanzi, do you understand how unfair that is? Yes, you punished me for things other women did. Yes. You made me prove something I never agreed to prove. Yes. No excuses. That changed the conversation. Kamanzi leaned forward. Ineza, I am sorry. Not because you discovered Imizi. I am sorry because I let fear become a rule for our relationship. Her anger softened, but her boundary did not. Love cannot be an examination one person gives without telling the other they are taking it. I know, and I will never spend my life auditioning to prove I'm different from women who hurt you. You shouldn't. Then understand this. She met his eyes. If we ever build something together, I need a partner, not a man secretly collecting evidence that I deserve him. Kamanzi swallowed. I want to be that partner. I believe you want to. Hope appeared in his face, but wanting is not the same as being ready. It faded. Ineza reached for his hand, not as surrender, as honesty. I am not ending this because you own a successful company, I know, and I am not staying because you own one. He nodded. I need some distance. His fingers tightened gently around hers before releasing. How much? I don't know. Kamanzi stood. I'll respect it. Before reaching the door, he turned. Ineza? Yes? I spent so long to try and out who would stay. If I had nothing that I forgot to ask what kind of man I needed to become for someone worth keeping. Ineza felt tears sting her eyes, but she did not call him back. Kamanzi left quietly, and as the door closed, Ineza understood that choosing herself did not always mean walking away forever. Sometimes it meant refusing to rush toward forgiveness simply because love was still there. Because love could explain why two people wanted another chance. Only trust could determine whether they deserved one. Mireille Rukundo sat at the end of a long walnut conference table inside the glass-walled offices of Amahoro Crest Developments, reviewing the final supplier files for one of Kigali's newest boutique hotel projects. The meeting room overlooked a landscaped courtyard filled with native plants and sculpted stone. Around her sat architects, financial analysts, procurement specialists, and the hotel's operations director. Mireille wore a structured crimson suit with subtle woven detailing along the cuffs. Her tablet rested beside three thick proposal folders. She turned another page, then stopped. Imizi Living. For several seconds, she simply stared at the name. A procurement manager beside her noticed. Something wrong? No. Mireille closed the folder halfway. Nothing at all, but something had changed. Until recently, Imizi Living had only been the company attached to the man her youngest sister loved. Now it was sitting in front of Mikre as one of the final suppliers being considered for a significant hospitality contract. She immediately became uncomfortable. I need to disclose something, she said. The operations director looked up. What? I know one of the company founders personally. Conflict. Potentially. How closely? He is dating my sister. The room became quiet. The operations director nodded. Then you shouldn't score the relationship section. Agreed. You can still review the financial documents. Your numbers don't have relatives. A few people smiled. Mireille did not. Numbers sometimes revealed more about people than conversations did. She opened the financial section. The first thing she expected to find was aggressive growth. Instead, the company appeared unusually cautious. Imizi Living had expanded gradually. Equipment purchases were financed conservatively. Supplier balances were controlled. Payroll remained consistent even during weaker periods. Mireille frowned. She turned another page. Employee retention was higher than she had expected. Training expenses were also substantial. She called across the table. Who reviewed workforce costs? A financial analyst raised her hand. I did. Why is vocational training this high? Internal apprenticeship program for existing staff and new craftspeople. Mireille, as they looked back at the file, how many? 32 people completed structured training through the company's program during the last cycle. Mirel became quiet. That did not fit the picture her mother had constructed. Not a struggling man waiting for Ineza to finance his future, a man creating livelihoods. The operations director tapped his pen against the table. What concerns you? Nothing yet. That sounded like something. Mirel turned several pages. There were no flashy executive expenses, no excessive vehicle allowances, no absurd entertainment costs. Instead, she found investments in machinery, workplace safety improvements, design software, and artisan partnerships outside Kigali. She looked toward the analyst again. Executive compensation? Moderate. Compared with revenue? Very moderate. Mireille's eyebrows rose. And the founders are taking distributions, limited ones. Why? They appear to be reinvesting. Mireille leaned back. She remembered Kamanzi arriving at her mother's villa in his aging Toyota. She had looked at that car and made a calculation. Old car, rented home, workshop, unstable man. She had considered herself rational. Now the numbers were showing her how irrational appearances could be. A colleague named Sandrine slid another document toward her. You should read this. What is it? Supplier references. Mireille opened it. A local timber cooperative described Ineza Living as one of its most reliable commercial buyers. Another partner praised the company for maintaining payment commitments during a difficult construction season. A hotel operator wrote that Kamanzi had personally rejected an installation because several pieces failed his own quality standards, even though the client had not noticed the problem. Mireille remembered something Ineza once said. He does not need people watching him to do the right thing. She had dismissed it as the language of a woman in love. Now she was reading evidence of exactly that. Still, Mireille refused to romanticize him. Good operations do not make someone a good partner, she said aloud. Sandrine looked confused. I didn't say they did. I know. Mireille closed the reference file. She was reminding herself. Because there was another truth she could not ignore. Kamanzi had allowed Ineza to misunderstand the extent of his role. Competence did not cancel secrecy. Generosity toward employees did not automatically excuse poor communication in a relationship. People were rarely all good or all bad. That was the uncomfortable part. The operations director began reviewing the commercial bids. Ineza Living was not the cheapest. Mireille noticed immediately. They're above 2 competitors. Correct, the procurement manager said. Then why are they still shortlisted? Durability projections. Explain. The lower bids use imported materials for several components. Ineza is proposing more locally sourced production with a longer warranty and local repair capacity. Mireille nodded slowly. Cheaper was not always better. Another assumption challenged. The meeting continued until the procurement manager reached the leadership evaluation. Kamanzi Niyomugabo will present with his partners during the final review. Mireille looked up. He presents personally? For major projects, apparently. She imagined her mother's reaction if Vestin saw the same documents. Part of Mireille wanted to call her immediately. She resisted. This was not gossip. It was confidential business information. And if Mireille had learned anything from watching Ineza's conflict with Kamanzi, it was that access to information did not automatically give someone the right to use it however they wanted. After the meeting, Sandrine remained behind gathering folders. You seemed unusually interested in Ineza. Mireille smiled faintly. I judged someone. Sandrine laughed. You. Apparently I remain human. What did you think? That he was financially careless? And now? Mireille glanced toward the stack of documents. Now I think he may be more financially disciplined than half the executives who try to impress me. Sandrine smiled. Will you tell him? No. Why not? Because this isn't about making him feel vindicated. Mireille walked toward the glass wall overlooking the courtyard. For years she had believed financial security could be recognized through visible signals, property, cars, job titles, the right neighborhood, the right clothes. Those things mattered. But they were not the whole picture. Some people spent money displaying stability. Others quietly built it. Her phone vibrated. A message from Vestin appeared. Have you spoken to your sister? Mireille stared at it before replying. Not about Kamanzi, her mother answered almost immediately. She needs to understand we were only trying to protect her. Mireille read the sentence twice, then typed carefully. Maybe. I think we should also ask what we were protecting her from. There was no immediate reply. Mireille placed her phone down. She was beginning to understand that her family's mistake had not been caring about Ineza's future. Their mistake had been believing they could measure another person's worth using the wrong evidence. Still, Mireille knew something her mother did not. Soon, Ineza Living would be presenting its work at one of Kigali's most visible hospitality events. Kamanzi would not be standing there as Ineza's supposedly struggling boyfriend. He would be standing there as a founder whose company had earned its place in the room. And when Vestine finally saw him clearly, Mireille wondered which truth would disturb her mother more. That Kamanzi was far more successful than she had assumed, or that his success should never have been required for him to deserve basic respect in the first place. The grand exhibition hall of the Kigali Horizon Hotel shimmered beneath its suspended glass lights as architects, investors, hospitality executives, and designers gathered for the unveiling of a new luxury property collection. Ineza Rukundo entered beside her mother. She wore a flowing gold and teal Mushanana-inspired evening dress, while Vestine Mukama chose deep burgundy with elegant embroidered detailing at the neckline. Mireille was already inside. "You came," she said. Vestine adjusted her bracelet. "You made it sound important. It is." Ineza glanced around. Large furniture installations filled the hall, sculpted lounge chairs, dining tables made from richly finished timber, woven lighting pieces, and contemporary decor inspired by Rwandan geometry. Something felt familiar. Then Ineza saw the emblem. Ineza Living. Her steps slowed. "Mireille," her sister followed her gaze. "I didn't arrange this. Did you know?" "I knew they were presenting." Vestine looked between them. "Who?" Neither daughter answered quickly enough. A presenter stepped onto the stage and welcomed the guests. Vestine was still examining a beautifully curved chair when the presenter began introducing the design partners behind the hotel collection. Then a name crossed the room. Kamanzi Mugabo. Vestine froze. Ineza did not. She had known what he was, but knowing privately and seeing him here were entirely different things. Kamanzi walked onto the stage wearing a sharply tailored midnight blue suit, accented by a narrow woven strip along the jacket pocket. There was no sawdust on his shoulder, no measuring tape around his neck, no aging Toyota visible outside the family dining room window. Yet strangely, Ineza did not feel as though she were looking at another version of him. He stood exactly as he did inside the workshop, calm, measured, uninterested in performing wealth. Vestine slowly turned toward Mireille. "That is Kamanzi." "Yes." "Your sister's Kamanzi." Mireille almost smiled. "There is only one?" Vestine stared at the stage. The presenter described Ineza Living as a growing Rwandan design company specializing in contemporary furniture for hospitality and residential projects. Then Kamanzi began speaking. "Our goal was never simply to put expensive furniture inside expensive buildings," he said. The room quieted. "Luxury should have a story. If a guest sits in a chair made in Rwanda, they should feel craftsmanship that belongs here, not something copied from somewhere else." Ineza felt a familiar warmth in her chest. This was the man who had argued with an imperfect chair, the man who paid men instead of punishing him for going home. Kamanzi continued, "We work with craftspeople whose skills deserve access to larger markets. Growth matters to us, but only if the people helping us grow can grow with us." Applause followed. Vestine did not clap immediately. She seemed too stunned. Finally, she whispered, "Why didn't he tell us?" Ineza looked at her mother. "That is a question I already asked him." Vestine turned toward her. And he was afraid knowing this would change how people treated him. Vestine's face tightened. "Well, it would have changed our conversation." "That is exactly the problem." Her mother looked offended. "Ineza, you respected Lionel before you knew his character because you knew his resume. You doubted Kamanzi before you knew his character because you didn't know his." Vestine looked back toward the stage. "I was trying to protect you, I know. The softness of Ineza's answer surprised her. But protection can become judgment when we stop asking questions. Vestine said nothing. After the presentation, guests moved through the exhibition while Kamanzi and his partners answered questions. Vestine remained unusually quiet. Near one display, two men in Emezi work shirts were speaking beside a finished dining table. One was Emmanuel. Vestine overheard him telling another guest about the company's apprenticeship program. The younger craftspeople do not simply come here to carry wood, Emmanuel explained. They learn costing, finish, machinery, even basic business management. The guest nodded toward Kamanzi. His idea, mostly, Emmanuel smiled. He says a company becomes weak when only the founder knows how to succeed. Vestine looked at him. You work for Mr. Niyomugabo? Emmanuel laughed gently. With him. The distinction seemed to surprise her. For how long? Long enough he can be stubborn. Vestine smiled by herself. That I believe, but fair. Emmanuel's expression became more serious. When my family needed me recently, he told me to leave work and still paid me. He did not announce it. He probably would not appreciate me announcing it either. Vestine glanced toward Kamanzi. For perhaps the first time, she was not calculating his value through property. She was observing the effect he had on people. Mireille stepped beside her. Mom, you knew all this? Some of it. And you said nothing? It wasn't my information to reveal. Vestine absorbed the gentle rebuke. Then she looked toward Ineza. I may owe your sister an apology. Mireille folded her arms. Only your sister. Vestine gave her a look. Do not enjoy this too much. I'm trying very hard. Kamanzi eventually noticed them. His eyes met Ineza's first. The room seemed to narrow around that single glance. Then he saw Vestine. He hesitated. Ineza could tell he was considering whether approaching them would make things worse. Vestine solved the problem herself. She walked toward him. Kamanzi, Madam Mukamana. His tone was respectful, not triumphant. Vestine looked around at the exhibition. So this is what you meant when you said you worked in furniture. A faint smile touched his face. Technically, I was telling the truth. Ineza immediately gave him a warning look. Kamanzi corrected himself. That was poorly phrased. Mireille covered a smile. Vestine surprised them all by laughing softly. Then her expression became serious. I judged you. Kamanzi did not pretend otherwise. Yes, I thought my daughter would have to carry you. I understood that. No, Vestine shook her head. You understood my words. I'm not sure I understood what was underneath them. Kamanzi waited. I was afraid. Ineza looked at her mother. Vestine rarely admitted fear. I have seen women disappear inside difficult marriages, she continued. I did not want that for my daughter. That fear is reasonable, Kamanzi said. But my conclusion was not. He remained silent. Vestine glanced at the beautifully furnished hall. Then she said something that surprised even herself. I thought seeing all this would prove I was wrong about you. Kamanzi looked at her. Doesn't it? Not completely. Ineza frowned. Vestine continued. This proves I was wrong about your financial position. She took a breath. But that should never have been necessary for me to treat you with respect. The words settled quietly between them. Kamanzi's expression softened. That means more than you probably realize. Vestine nodded. I still have questions about why you hid so much from Ineza. You should. And I am still her mother. I am painfully aware. This time everyone laughed, but Ineza remained thoughtful. Something important had changed. Her mother finally knew who Kamanzi was, yet the revelation had not solved everything. It had simply removed money from the argument. Now Vestine would have to examine her prejudice. Kamanzi would have to repair the trust he had damaged, and Ineza would still have to make the final decision herself. Because the most valuable truth revealed in that luxurious hall was not that the supposedly poor man had become successful. It was that success should never have been the price of being treated like a man worthy of dignity. Kamanzi Niyomugabo was reviewing fabric samples inside the front office of Emezi Living when Claudine appeared at the open doorway. Her expression carried the restrained amusement of someone trying very hard to remain professional. You have visitors. Kamanzi kept his eyes on the samples. Clients? Not exactly. Suppliers? No, he finally looked up. Claudine stepped aside. Vestin Mukamana and Mireille Rukundo were standing behind her. Kamanzi slowly put down the fabric. That explains your face. Claudine smiled. I will suddenly remember several urgent things I need to do elsewhere. She disappeared before anyone could respond. Vestin wore an elegant cobalt blue dress with embroidered detailing across one shoulder. Mireille stood beside her in a cream trousers suit accented with a bright patterned scarf. Neither woman looked hostile. That made Kamanzi more nervous than hostility would have. Madame Mukamana, Mireille. Vestin looked around the modern office. Through the glass partition behind Kamanzi, craft people moved between workstations beneath warm pendant lights. Furniture samples stood against one wall, and large design boards displayed projects in development. May we speak? Vestin asked. Of course. Kamanzi gestured toward a seating area. The three sat around a low wooden table. Vestin immediately ran one hand across its surface. You made this, my team did. You always say that. Because it is usually true. Mireille smiled faintly. At least you have learned not to say you merely work around furniture. Kamanzi winced. I deserve that. Yes, Mireille replied. Vestin glanced at her daughter. We did not come here to tease him. I know. I am simply enjoying the opportunity. Kamanzi almost laughed. Then Vestin became serious. I came to apologize. The simplicity of the statement surprised him. You already said something similar at the event, no. Vestin shook her head. At the event, I apologized because I discovered I had underestimated you. She folded her hands carefully. That was not enough. Kamanzi remained silent. Vestin continued. I went home thinking about what I would have done if that presentation had never happened. Mireille watched her mother quietly. If you really were only a craftsman earning an ordinary income, Vestin said, would I have changed my opinion? Kamanzi did not answer for her. Vestin did it herself. Probably not. There was no pride in the admission, only the discomfort. And that bothered me. Kamanzi leaned back. Why? Because it meant my respect had conditions. The workshop sounds behind them seemed softer now. Vestin looked toward the glass partition. I told myself I was protecting Ineza. Some of that was true. Marriage can place enormous burdens on women. I have watched capable women become exhausted because they spent years carrying households almost alone. Kamanzi nodded. That fear is not unreasonable. No, but I allowed a reasonable fear to justify an unreasonable conclusion. Mireille glanced at him. We all did. Vestin continued. I saw your car and decided what kind of future you could provide. I heard the word workshop and assumed you lacked ambition. I heard that you rented your home and treated it like evidence of failure. Kamanzi smiled slightly. My Toyota has suffered greatly in this family. Mireille laughed. Even Vestin smiled. Then her expression softened again. I was wrong. Kamanzi considered his response. I appreciate you saying that, but I need you to know something else. He waited. If you had no company, no hotel contracts, no employees, and no impressive presentation, you would still have basic respect in my home. Kamanzi's smile disappeared. The statement clearly reached somewhere deeper. Thank you. Vestin nodded. Do not misunderstand me. I would still ask questions. I would expect nothing less. I would still want to know whether you were responsible. You should. And whether you had a plan. Also fair. But those questions should have been about character and responsibility, not about whether your possessions looked expensive enough. Mireille looked toward her mother with quiet approval. Kamanzi lowered his eyes briefly. I owe you both something too. Mireille raised an eyebrow. This is becoming unusually mature. Mireille, Vestin warned. I'm listening. Kamanzi looked at them. I allowed you to misunderstand me. Vestin nodded. You did. I told myself it was because I wanted to know whether people would respect me without knowing about Imizi. And was it? Partly. What was the other part? Kamanzi took a breath. I enjoyed proving people wrong. Neither woman expected that answer, he continued. When someone looked at my old car and underestimated me, I knew eventually there would be a moment when they discovered the truth. Mireille leaned forward, and you liked that moment. Yes, the honesty was uncomfortable, but I have started realizing something. Vestin waited. If I deliberately allow someone to build the wrong picture of me because I want the satisfaction of watching it collapse later, then I am still participating in the judgment. Mirelle slowly nodded. That is actually very perceptive. I have had excellent criticism lately. Vestine almost smiled. Then she asked the question that mattered most. And Ineza? Kamanzi's expression changed immediately. She asked for distance. Are you giving it to her? Yes, good. He looked slightly surprised. You expected me to tell you to chase her? Maybe. Vestine shook her head. My daughter spent too much of her life believing love meant accommodating everyone else. Kamanzi listened. If she asked for space, respect the space. I intend to, but do not confuse respecting her boundary with doing nothing. He frowned. What do you mean? Become better whether she returns or not. The sentence landed heavily. Vestine continued. If your lesson from this is simply that you should reveal your company earlier next time, then you learned nothing. Kamanzi lowered his gaze. The problem was never when I told her about the company. Exactly. It was why I believed I needed to control what she knew. Vestine nodded. For the first time, they understood each other completely. Mireille rose and walked toward one of the display pieces. A partially finished wooden chair stood near a design table. Unlike the sleek furniture surrounding it, one corner remained rough. This looks familiar, she said. Kamanzi turned. It is. Vestine joined her. What is special about it? Kamanzi touched the back of the chair. I started designing it around the time I met Ineza. Why haven't you finished it? I kept changing it. Mireille smiled. That sounds symbolic. It wasn't supposed to be. Vestine studied unfinished wood. What will you do with it? Finish it. For her? Kamanzi thought carefully. No? The answer surprised them. For myself. Vestine looked at him. Kamanzi continued. I used to tell Ineza people notice the finish first, but what matters is what keeps the chair standing. And now? Now I think the structure does not excuse a damaged surface. Both matter. Vestine smiled slowly. You may be more suited to my daughter than I wanted to admit. Kamanzi laughed. That almost sounded like approval. Do not become comfortable. Mireille shook her head. Progress comes slowly in our family. When the women prepared to leave, Vestine stopped at the doorway. Kamanzi, yes? Whatever Ineza chooses, do not make this about winning her back. He understood immediately. She is not a prize. No, Vestine looked directly at him, and neither are you. Kamanzi nodded. After they left, he stood alone inside the workshop. For months, he had believed the central conflict was simple. Ineza's family thought he was not good enough. He would eventually prove them wrong. But there was nothing noble about needing other people to regret underestimating you. Real dignity did not depend on a dramatic revelation, and real love did not ask another person to pass hidden tests. Kamanzi walked toward the unfinished chair and picked up a piece of fine sandpaper. For once, he was not thinking about how the finished piece would look to anyone else. He was thinking about whether the structure beneath it was strong enough to deserve the beautiful surface he wanted to build. Kamanzi Neomugabo stood beside a long walnut work table inside Imizi living, studying the unfinished frame of a dining chair when Claudine Uwas appeared at the workshop entrance. You have visitors. He continued examining the joint. Tell them I'll be there shortly. Claudine did not move. You may want to come now. Something in her voice made him look up. Vestine Mukamana stood several steps behind her. Mireille was beside her. Kamanzi straightened. He had expected suppliers, perhaps a hotel representative. Not Ineza's mother and sister. Claudine gave him a small smile. I suddenly have paperwork. She disappeared. Vestine wore a royal blue dress with elegant pattern detailing along the sleeves. Mireille had chosen a cream suit over a bright kititenji blouse. Neither woman looked angry. That somehow made Kamanzi more nervous. Madam Mukamana, Vestine is fine. He raised an eyebrow. That feels like significant progress. Mireille almost smiled. Don't become confident. Vestine gave her daughter a look. Kamanzi, may we speak somewhat quieter? Of course. He led them into a glass-walled meeting room overlooking the workshop floor. Several finished chairs stood along one wall beside material samples, architectural drawings, and photographs of completed hotel interiors. Vestine sat slowly. For once, she did not begin with questions. Kamanzi waited. Finally, she said, I owe you an apology. You already apologized at the exhibition? No, Vestine shook her head. I apologized because I discovered you were successful. Kamanzi remained still. That is not the apology I should have given. Mireille looked toward her mother. Vestine continued. When you came into my home, I saw an old car. I heard that you rented a house. I heard the word workshop. She gave a humorless smile. And before dinner was finished, I had written an entire future for you. Kamanzi leaned back slightly. You were worried about Ineza. I was. That wasn't unreasonable. My concern was not unreasonable. Vestine looked directly at him. My certainty was. The distinction caught his attention. She folded her hands. I convinced myself that because I loved my daughter, every conclusion I reached about the man she loved must also be wise. Mireille quietly added, we were both guilty of that. Vestine nodded. We called it protection. Kamanzi glanced through the glass toward the craftspeople working outside. And now? Now I think protection without humility can become control. He looked back at her. Those were not what he expected from Vestine Mukamana, she continued. I saw you on that stage. I heard about the contracts. I saw what you had built. Kamanzi's expression tightened slightly. Vestine noticed. That is exactly why I came here. Why? Because I don't want my lesson to be that I should respect men in old cars because one of them might secretly own a successful company. Kamanzi stared at her. Mireille smiled faintly. Vestine's voice became softer. If you had never built Imizi Living, I would still have been wrong to treat you as though your bank account determined whether you deserve dignity. For several moments, Kamanzi said nothing. Then he nodded. Thank you. Vestine exhaled. I would still worry about my daughter marrying someone financially irresponsible. You should. I would still ask whether he works. Fair. Whether he has direction. Also fair. And whether she will spend her marriage carrying responsibilities that should belong to two people. Kamanzi nodded again, but Vestine continued, I should have asked those questions instead of assuming I already knew the answers. Mireille leaned forward. There is another reason we came. Kamanzi looked at her. I reviewed Imizi during a professional procurement process. His expression immediately sharpened. You reviewed us? Financially, should I be frightened? You should always be frightened when I have spreadsheets. He laughed despite himself. Mireille continued, I cannot discuss confidential details, but I can tell you what I learned about myself. Kamanzi waited. I thought stability looked like a new car, property, the right neighborhood, and a title everyone recognized. She glanced through the glass wall. Then I saw a company reinvesting in people, equipment, training, and obligations instead of spending everything on appearances. Her expression became thoughtful. I had confused displaying stability with building it. Kamanzi nodded slowly. That distinction cost me several uncomfortable conversations. Mireille smiled. You contributed to those conversations. Yes. His voice became more serious. And I owe both of you honesty too. Vestine watched him carefully. I knew what you thought about me. You did. And sometimes I enjoyed letting you think it. Mireille lifted her eyebrows. That is unusually honest. I have been receiving unpleasant lessons lately. Vestine said nothing, Kamanzi continued. When people underestimated me, part of me liked imagining the moment they would discover they were wrong. Why? Pride. He did not soften the word. I told myself it was about protecting my privacy. Some of it was. But another part of me wanted the satisfaction. Vestine studied him, and Ineza, his face changed immediately. She was never supposed to become part of that, but she did. Yes, Kamanzi looked down. I allowed fear from previous relationships to shape the one relationship that had done nothing to deserve it. Mireille nodded. That was your mistake. I know. Do you? He looked at her. I used to think my mistake was waiting too long to explain Imizi, and now my mistake was believing I had the right to quietly measure people without allowing them to know what they were being measured against. Vestine's expression softened. Good. The word surprised him. Good? Not what you did. She almost smiled. That you understand it. Silence settled between them. Then Kamanzi asked the question he had avoided. How is Ineza? Vestine glanced at Mireille. Mireille answered. She is fine. That is all? That is all you are entitled to right now. He nodded. Fair Vestine leaned forward. She asked you for space. Yes, give it to her. I have, but do not spend that space waiting for her to return. Kamanzi frowned. What should I do? Change the things that need changing even if she never comes back. He became very still. Vestine continued. If you become more honest only because you want Ineza back, then honesty is simply another strategy. Kamanzi looked at her for a long moment. That is difficult to hear. Useful forcing often are. He smiled slightly. Now I understand where Ineza gets it. Vestine smiled too. Before leaving, her attention moved toward an unfinished wooden chair standing near the design wall. She walked over. This one is different. Kamanzi joined her. I designed it around the period when I met Ineza. The chair had elegant curved lines, but one section remained unfinished. Why did you stop? I kept changing the design. Mireille ran her fingers lightly along the wooden back. What happens to it now? I finish it. Vestine looked at him. For Ineza? Kamanzi thought before answering. No, for who? For the man who started it. Vestine seemed pleased by the answer. Kamanzi touched the unfinished wood. I once told Ineza people notice the finish first, but what matters is what keeps the chair standing. And do you still believe that? Yes, he paused. But I understand something else now. What? A strong structure does not mean you can neglect the surface forever. What people experience matters too. Vestine nodded. That sounds less like furniture. It probably is. As she prepared to leave, she stopped. She sighed the door. Kamanzi, yes? Whatever Ineza eventually decides, remember something. He waited. My daughter is not a reward you receive because you learned your lesson. I know. And you are not a prize she receives because you turned out to be successful. Kamanzi nodded. Vestine smiled gently. You are two adults, deciding whether you can build something healthier than what either of you brought into the relationship. Then she left with Miri. Kamanzi remained behind. Through the glass wall, he watched his employees continue their work as though nothing important had happened. Yet something had. The family who once begged Ineza to leave him had finally come to his workplace. But they had come because they wanted access to his money. They had come because they had learned that admitting you were wrong was more valuable than pretending you had always been wise. And Kamanzi had learned something equally uncomfortable. Proving people wrong could feed pride. Building trust required something much harder. It required becoming honest even when there was no audience waiting to applaud the transformation. Ineza returned to the Imizi Living Workshop, not because her family had changed their minds, and not because Kamanzi had finally proven he was successful enough to deserve her. She returned because she had watched what he did after she walked away. He stopped treating privacy as permission to hide difficult truths. Kamanzi, in turn, saw Ineza become firmer with her family, loving them without allowing their fears to make decisions for her. They began again slowly, with conversations instead of promises. Before discussing marriage, they talked openly about savings, debt, careers, family responsibilities, and what would happen if either of them lost everything they had built. When Kamanzi eventually proposed, there was still no crowded ballroom and no dramatic display of wealth. He brought Ineza to the workshop and placed the finished wooden chair beside her. I spent years believing strength was what nobody could see, he said. You taught me that what we allow each other to see matters too. Inez smiled before accepting his proposal. Their wedding was elegant but intimate, filled with bright Rwandan fabrics, family, craftspeople, and friends. Vestine cried as she embraced Kamanzi, not because her daughter had married a successful businessman, but because Ineza had chosen a partner without abandoning herself. The deepest lesson in Ineza and Kamanzi's story is not that we should treat a struggling person kindly because they might secretly be wealthy. That still makes wealth the measure of worth. The better lesson is to respect people even if their financial situation never changes. At the same time, love should not require a woman to ignore practical questions. Asking whether a partner is responsible, honest about money, willing to work, and capable of sharing adult responsibilities is not materialistic, it is wisdom. The mistake begins when possessions replace character as evidence. Vestin saw an old car and assumed failure. Kamanzi experienced people chasing status and assumed secrecy would protect his heart. Both allowed fear to become judgment. Ineza chose another path. She listened, observed, asked questions, set boundaries, and made her own decisions. Perhaps that is the most valuable reminder for any woman watching. You do not have to choose between love and self-respect. Healthy love should make room for both. Before building a future with someone, ask not only, what does this person have, but also, how do they handle truth, responsibility, disappointment, and power? Because money can change quickly. Character is what you will actually live with.